Hey, happy Friday, everyone. I just wanted to jump on and talk about an older movie. I watched it when it first came out, but I totally have forgotten about it and it showed up under things I may like. So I figured I'd why not do a rewatch? The Butterfly Effect, starring Ashton Kutcher and Amy Smart. Um, the movie actually got really bad reviews from critics, which I was surprised because for the concept and for the time, I thought it was an original idea and I thought it was well written, but they panned it and said it was too dark. And I'm like, but for the genre, it should be dark. And they really trashed Ashton Kutcher's acting abilities. I guess they're saying that he was not in depth enough to play such a serious role, which I disagree. I think he did a great job and I think it was very well written. And it was very, I think it was well executed as well. The movie's main characters are Evan and Kaylee, Tommy, and Lenny. And Evan and Kaylee are very close, and Tommy is Kaylee's brother, and he is a very difficult personality type, and reasonably so. And just trigger warning, the film does discuss issues as far as suicide, um, child essay, grape, all the things, animal mutilation. So if those things are triggering to you, I wouldn't suggest watching it. Evan suffers from some health issues, and you'll see that they're covered when he sees the doctor in the film. But he has seizures and he has memory loss, and his traumas that he suffered on top of that are the stress induced by those traumas can cause him to go into a seizure. So his father is in a long-term healthcare, mental health care facility, and his mom's a single mom, and she's doing what everybody's trying to do out here: make ends meet, take care of her son. In one of the opening scenes, you see Evan holding a knife, and his mom walking in the room like, "What is going on?" And then he snaps out of it. He doesn't even remember. But one of his traumas is that Kaylee's father forced Evan and Kaylee to um, participate in child essay material together. And Tommy holds a giant grudge against Evan, displaced, obviously, but how do you navigate through such a traumatic thing and like witnessing it? So, and Lenny is constantly, relentlessly bullied by Tommy. Tommy is terrible. Well, he's not very nice to anybody, but Lenny really gets the brunt of the bullying. Um, so another trauma is that they played a prank on a mother and child, and they placed the dynamite in a mailbox, which caused horrible, horrible consequences for the family. And Evan's mom at that point already stressed out enough. This is like another thing to add to the list. Um, Also, backstory, or not backstory, but to rewind a little bit, Evan's dad did end up ultimately dying in the film. He ends up having a fit and he starts choking Evan, and the staff at the facility that he is in ends up ultimately killing him while trying to restrain him. So you kind of get those and it's very quickly touched on in the beginning of the film, and then we jump to college where Evan doesn't really remember much, or it doesn't seem like it. And he's at a bar with his friend, and his friend lives a very, or is styled very alternatively, but the ladies love him. So if you've seen the movie, if you know, you know. But they go back to his room later that night, and him and a woman that he met at the bar are discussing his journals under his bed. So he shows her, and then he ultimately realizes, like, when he writes in his journal, he can change time and go to and alternate between different realities. But he wants to dig into his childhood a little bit. So he ends up going back to his hometown, and he sees Kaylee, who's working at a diner, and he tries to discuss the things that happened in their childhood. And she's very triggered, very upset about it. And he later finds out that she killed herself. So he decides to go into his journal and rewrite the things that happen and try to go back to a memory and the memory of what happened in that basement when the or George, Kaylee and Tommy's father, recorded them. And he does go back and he threatens George and tells him he's never to touch her, never to do anything to her. Um, Back off, don't even think about it. And then we end up fast forwarding, and he's in college and Kaylee's in college, and she's in a sorority and he's in a fraternity. They're like the golden couple on campus, living their best life. And he thinks he's done it, he's fixed it, until they go to dinner one night and one of his fraternity brothers tells him that his car has been vandalized, smashed windows, everything is bad. And that's when Kaylee fesses up and tells Evan that Tommy is out of prison for something that he did a long time ago, and he's coming for them. And he does. He ends up confronting Evan, and Evan ends up beating Tommy to the point that he murders him, and then Evan ends up in prison. So while in prison, he asks his mom to send him his journals. And also in prison, he is in the fray of the white supremacist gang, and they are making his life a living hell. Well, all the prisoners are making his life a living hell. So he ends up kind of, I guess, being mentored by a gentleman who's been in prison for a while and just telling him, you gotta watch your back, you need to toughen up. You're not gonna make it, because apparently this is a long prison bid that he's like on, and his family is currently trying to get his sentence reduced, but he's got to figure out how to survive the prison system. So he convinces his mentor that he can travel across time and he can change the outcome of different scenarios. So he ends up going into the gang leader's cell and he propositions them for survival. And then he ends up stabbing them. And while everyone's rushing to the cell to try to get to Evan, he hurries up and he scrolls and scribbles everything down. And then he ends up back in his college dorm room and he decides to rewrite everything again. So this time he goes to the trauma of when his dog, so Tommy murders Evan's dog by setting him on fire. And Lenny ends up intervening and he accidentally kills Tommy. So then we find out that Tommy is gone and Lenny is institutionalized and Kaylee has become a sex worker. And he goes to see Kaylee and they end up talking, and obviously life just has not dealt her a good hand. So again, here we go back. And he's like, I got to rewrite this again. So he goes back and he scribbles and he tries to come up with a new scenario. And then the new scenario, he thinks, okay, this trauma, when we set off the fireworks, maybe this'll save us. This will change everything. So he ends up running across the street and stopping the mother and child from opening the fireworks that were about to detonate. And then we end up back in college and he is a double amputee, so he has no hands. And Lenny and Kaylee are a couple and they're happy as can be. And Tommy is saved and he is following Christ and he's like the poster child. He's good, everything. So Evan is obviously brokenhearted because he doesn't get the girl, and then the girl is with his best friend, and he tries to unalive himself, and Tommy actually saves him. So this reality won't do. So then we end up with him changing reality again, and he alters it to where he goes back to the basement again, and he confronts George, Kaylee and Tommy's dad, and tells him again, you're not going to touch them, you're not going to do anything, and threatens him with the detonated firework that went off in the mailbox. And when he does it, Kaylee, and he ends up dropping it or leaving it, and then Kaylee ends up picking it up and explodes, and unfortunately, she passes away. And now Evan is the one that is institutionalized. It's all over the place at this point. It's like he's trying to fix everything, but it's that one little thing that changes the outcome of all scenarios. So he doesn't have his notebooks because they won't let him have it while he's in treatment. And he's been in treatment for a very long time, or he's been institutionalized for a very long time. But he knows if he plays home videos, he can go back in and change reality. So he ends up breaking into his doctor's office and he ends up getting his videos and starts playing them. And in this scene, it's another one of those rush scenes like the prison, and they're pulling at the door trying to get in. Evan, come out, come out. And he ends up at a party, and you can see it's when they were children. And this is literally the first time he ever met Kaylee. And he runs up to her and he whispers something in her ear as a threat. And she runs away. And then you realize that Kaylee and Tommy ultimately, in this new reality, they go live with their mom, and their mom was a very kind woman, and she had remarried and moved on with her life. So they end up living a good life. And they show flashbacks of birthday parties and like hugs and all the things that children deserve. And they end up growing up healthy and happy. And from what we see, Evan ends up living a good life. Like he ends up going to college. We can tell from the flashbacks and everything. And then we're 10 years in the future, and Evan's leaving work, and then he's walking down the street, and him and Kaylee cross paths, but they don't realize it because they haven't seen each other in how long. But they kind of leave us open-ended. We don't know what Kaylee's doing, what she's been up to, what happens to Tommy, what he's doing. But we know Lenny and Evan end up going back to college. They end up graduating, and everyone, I guess, kind of gets a loose, happier ending. From what I've read, there's actually an alternative ending that Evan ends up ultimately sacrificing himself. So while he's in his mom's womb and while she's delivering him, he ends up unaliving himself with his own umbilical cord. I'm glad that they didn't do that ending. That's very different, and I like the way that it ended. Again, I think it was a great film. I think it was a great idea, and I don't think it gets the credit that is due. Tell me what you think. Yeah, and I will be doing a review when we get the season finale of season 1 of The Testament. So have a great weekend. Bye.